David Amerland, I want to talk about something that was inspired from your book and a lot of side conversations we've had, the intrapersonal, the world of commitment and feelings and sensing and context, the human condition.
Thank you. And yes, absolutely. I mean, it's obvious that, we have had countless conversations on this, and we haven't actually had a recorded one for the audience because we're so business focused. And business really is people doing business with people.
Yeah.
So if we don't address the people, if we don't address the personal journey, the personal development, then we can't possibly be really adequately addressing the business one. So we'll start with the personal one and go deep inside and see how that changes a little bit.
Yeah. In fact, I believe self-employment is one of the best personal development programs you can get. In my own experience, one of the breakthroughs in life for me in my own work was permission to be committed to something and then live out of that commitment. And I've shared personally with you that I struggled with some learning challenges growing up, and I was amazingly good at self-doubting myself in everything. Am I a good person? Can I do anything right? I mean, I just riddled for almost the first 30 years of my life with the kind of ADD dyslexic condition of doubt. And then I learned the concept of I could be committed to being a great person. And that gave me a freedom that opened and changed my whole world, where I didn't for a whole year say, I'm not allowed to check in on my feelings of myself, just focus on my commitment and what I get from other people. So that's why I want to talk about this, because I don't know, honestly, through the trajectory of self-doubt and depression, I don't know I would have survived if I didn't learn the distinction of surrendering to commitment.
Yes.
As freedom, not as bondage, not as negative, but as freedom in my own life.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack what you said, because you said so many really good things, and they're relatively dense because you've had that journey and it's there for you. So it's really clear. Now, we tell people to get in touch with their feelings. We tell them to do that because every decision is really emotional. And if we don't understand the emotions that drive it, then we'll never understand the decision and we can't control it. So what happens, however, and this is what you refer to, what happens when we tell people to get in touch with their emotions? If you tell me, if I tell you, if I tell the average person, what do you feel? Well, you feel incapable, uncertain, you feel small, you feel a fraud, you feel all those things. And this is not really what we mean by saying getting in touch with your emotions, right? But this is the things we feel, and they're very real for us. And you mentioned commitment, the ability to go to basically commit to something. Now, commitment scares us always. Why does it scare us? Commitment scares us because we know that to commit requires work. And we shy away from work because we don't know how difficult it's going to be. So there's an uncertainty factor in the difficulty. So we shy away from that. We know there's going to be a workload which we don't know how difficult that is going to be. So we shy away from that. And we know that commitment is long-term. And long-term, who knows what's going to happen, day after tomorrow. So that scares us as well. So all those fears then compound together and they become a huge thing in our head. And we tend to shy away from commitment. So what did you say? I mean, this is a magic formula you actually applied. You said, I'm freeing myself to commit to something which I want.
And that means over 1 year too.
Yeah,
time
exactly.
Period was very important to even allow to do it for those fears you said.
Exactly. So you were really smart about it. You said, okay, I'm going to create boundaries, and we need those boundaries. So it has to be manageable. And I'm going to do that in a specific frame of time. We need the frame of time because that signals the end and also shows a beginning. And we can use those two sort of signposts to gauge our progress from day to day. So, if you want to do something over 365 days, put up an A4 sheet piece of paper and, put all the squares and cross out each day, right? 365 squares. You're going to feel a sense of achievement just in that. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, that sense of achievement actually drives you forward. But at the same time, interesting things happen inside our head when we're focusing on completing the next little square on a piece of paper. We are thinking ahead. We're beginning to plan. If we begin to plan, we allocate mental resources in imaging the models which will take us from today into tomorrow and the day after. And suddenly, the things which were amorphous, unstructured, sort of our mist of fear and uncertainty begin to become clearer to us and become attainable. And that's what actually drives us. So what you just said is the kind of formula that anybody should be able to apply in their own life to do exactly what you did. So if you're feeling uncertainty and fear about something, create a plan, create a timeline, create a set of actions, and just implement it one day after another.
And I want to add, this is not about ignoring those emotions. It's witnessing them is different than blocking them. Very important thing. I believe blocking the emotions creates a whole nother form of neurosis. So it's like, this is okay. All right. During that year, it's like, okay, I feel worthless again. Oh, I'm too stupid to be alive again. Okay. What's my commitment? My commitment is for this year. I'm going to notice those, but I'm not participating in it.
Exactly.
And one of my favorite movies, I don't know if you've seen it, but The Beautiful Mind. Did you ever do you remember that? It was, and of course, it's a little different than the actual story, but what I loved in Beautiful Mind, for people who are not familiar, was a Nobel Peace Prize economist that had schizophrenia. And he had these, and then with the wonderful piece of the movie, and sorry for telling it, but at the end, the hallucinations never left him. He just stopped participating in them. And that's, to me, as good as it gets for a lot of stuff. Not that I'm not an advocate of good therapy, and people can have real biochemical things that go on in their life. So I want to have deep compassion for that. But that's the beginning piece. And one other piece of this to add on to it was during my parents getting sick. I'm an only child. Okay. And there's a certain level of self-absorbedness that went with that. I want to own. Okay. I'm very blessed, had good parents, but I was only child. So it was and when in the care of my parents, I had to pick. My commitment was to give them the highest quality of life. Number one, not the longest life. So there would be great concerts I'd want to see, and I've got to put things on hold and go to see them. Did I feel like doing that? No, it was my favorite band. I may never see them again. I really want to get, and now that I've successfully put on their funeral, they've passed. I am so pleased with those actions. But in the moment, it looked like such an unpleasant experience to do. But I decided while they were there, that was my commitment, and I held on to it. And that's where I think we've gotten so absorbed in whatever bubbly emotions you have. I don't think personally real fulfillment in life can even occur when you're slave to just the biochemical feelings and you must follow them all.
Again, let's unpack all that.
Yeah.
This is what happens to us. We need to think of attention, the attention we have inside our head, as a beacon, right? So it's like a flashlight. It turns onto something. Whatever it turns onto and shines upon becomes really important for us. If our attention is on ourselves only, for instance, we're self-absorbed, we can't empathize with anybody else. And this is the most real thing for us, ourselves. Nothing else matters. If we turn our attention outwards, other things matter, and we dial down our own sense of presence and need. So when it comes to commitment, essentially what we're doing is we're focusing that flashlight of our attention into something towards the future. And that becomes really important to us. Because it becomes really important to us, because we're shining our attention upon it, then everything that we have to do in terms of the cost associated with getting there becomes less onerous for us. Because we can see something of value which we're going to achieve in the future. And in your particular case, you want to give your parents a good quality of life, great memories. Whatever sacrifice you had to make that happen, sure, it was a real sacrifice for you, but it wasn't as important as what you're getting. And having got the end result now, you actually feel that you fulfilled something which has built you as a better person, which is part of your identity. And that's really important. That's what attention does. So by having commitment, by focusing our attention on things that matter, we essentially reevaluate the cost of our actions, and we reappraise what we get as the outcomes and the value of those outcomes to us.
Yeah, and the piece of it is, it doesn't mean I couldn't nitpick away and go, well, I should have done more of this and this, but when I step back and look at it, it's like, okay, I did a pretty good job. You know, I kept them from being killed by the medical system at least 12 times I can count, where it's like, why are we doing that process? Well, there's a statistical thing we're doing over here. Is it necessary? No, it's not. Okay, you know, if my mother is off this medication, what happens? Well, she may not live as long, but she gets her memory back. You know, I'm taking responsibility over and over of those pieces. I could not have done that if I didn't come from my commitment, not my feelings, because my feelings was, I don't want to confront, I don't want to offend someone, or I don't want to do this. I want to be home and doing whatever I like. And this is an important piece that I want to introduce, because I think when I live my life only for what's fun for Martin, over time, my life becomes more and more meaningless. Meaningless.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I have to do more, and it still becomes more. It's like a hole develops. But if I have a part where my life is something bigger than me, for me, then it actually feels more meaningful. And, you know, I have that t-shirt that says, if your life's boring, it's because you're boring. Life begins outside your comfort zone. It's related to that. If,
Absolutely.
you know, I realized I was living most of the first part of my life just for Martin. And it was the most less meaningful, not without meaning, less meaningful life than the second part when I went, I have to do it. And this is not black and white or perfect day by day.
No. Okay, and again, I mean, you're throwing so much stuff out here. We can actually spend a couple of hours unpacking all this. But let's try and look at some of the things which you said, which are really important. Okay, the first thing is that we need meaning, because that gives us a sense of purpose. Without a sense of purpose, we don't think that anything which we do has any kind of lasting value. So, you know, if we are focused only on ourselves, all we can think about is our next immediate need, which needs to be satisfied. And we have countless needs. You mentioned that, you know, we must embrace our emotions, not try to block them. This is really important. We can't realistically block an emotion without expanding a lot of energy to actually cast it to the back of our minds. So blocking an emotion isn't something which you pick up and put in a box and put it in and forget about it. You don't do that. Think of it as a bull which you put behind a wall which you have to build. And after you build that wall, the bull continuously knocks itself against it. So you need to keep reinforcing it. So in order for us to actually ignore an emotion, we must be constantly focused upon it. And that is draining. That is really tiring. It's like trying to tell a lie. You know, you tell a lie to somebody who knows you, right? Somebody who doesn't know you, you can sort of, you know, lie to them and walk away, and there's nothing there because they don't know you. They haven't got a frame of reference. Somebody who knows you, you're lying to them, and you can see they're constantly checking you. So in order for them to check you and pass that check, then you have to make a more and more elaborate lie, and you have to sort of weave this and out. And whenever they catch you out, you have to build a bigger thing. And by the end of it, you're exhausted. You say, look, okay, I'm lying to you. This never happened, right? Why do we feel the need to come clean? A lot of people say, well, it's a guilty conscience. No, what it really is the energetic cost to our brain is so large by then that the only way out is to come clean and say, phew, now I don't have to maintain this constant, you know, complexity inside my head, which is killing me. So that's what it is. So acknowledging our emotions, acknowledging the fact that, you know, there is a self-serving, selfish element in all of us. We acknowledge the fact there's no perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. We're going to fall down. We're all going to fall short. But that shouldn't be the end of our existence. That shouldn't be the end of our identity. It shouldn't be the end of the journey. We should be able to continue and improve and constantly make up for that. We should be paying attention to what matters. We should understand that the things that we value the most are the things that have a long-term purpose, which then has a meaningful part in the things which we do, in the actions which we actually take to get there. So purpose gives us meaning. We need meaning to feel that we matter. Nothing is worse as people to feel that we don't matter. Mm-hmm. So to go back to your example, suppose we get the richest person in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And we give them all the money they can ever want. And that's all we need to give them, nothing else. Mm-hmm. No connections, no job, no real purpose in anything, but can live forever, or for as long as their life is, quite happily without bothering with anybody. They're going to be really unhappy. Because they'll feel they have no value, despite having all the money in the world, which is a paradox, right? Because we think that money gives us value, but it doesn't. Money gives us power, which we use to acquire meaning, which means that what we do has a purpose. So all those things that you said, if we sort of simplify it along those lines, give us an example of, for lack of a better description, how we should live our life.
Mm-hmm. And this leads, interesting in my mind, to another condition, because we've seen from the stress of the world how polarized the world's becoming. And one of my quotes that's always interests me is, the more you hate something, the more you become what you hate. And I think this is related. I don't know where, but I want to trust my instinct here. And we'll talk about instinct versus emotions, because I do see those as different things. And that bubbled up of what I noticed through my life's inquiry into, for some reason, I've been drawn to this question of, how can we all live together? How can we make life work for everyone? What is possible? I don't know where it came from. It goes back to my teenage years, but the condition was noticing, oh, there was a Star Trek movie show that I loved, and one of the characters was, the left side of their face was black, and the other character, the right side, was black, and all they were doing is killing each other. And the outside world, you go, you're just flip sides of the same thing. But I really want to talk about that, because I think that's what's playing out very strongly in the world. And I'm watching to make sure my own psyche doesn't get sucked into it. That which we hate the most, we seem to become as human beings.
Yes.
That's why the importance of having a bigger purpose. Like, what do I really want it to look like? Do I want a world where we honor everyone, even the people we don't like, even the people I hate?
Especially the people we don't like, I think.
Yeah,
it's easy,
right.
It's easy to honor people we like because they reflect back our reality, which we have already accepted. People we don't like reflect parts of the world which we don't want to exist. So we just want them to go away. And if we do that, then we negate people. And also we bring up the question, well, what makes us any better than them? So really what you said, if you hate something strongly, sooner or later, you're going to become like it. Why? Because inside your head, that hate feeds on the thing which you dislike. And before long, the characteristics of that thing, which are pretty strong, begin to shape you. So essentially, hate is a self-destructive force. It leads to wrong decisions, and ultimately it doesn't change anything, and does lead to the kind of gap between people. You mentioned polarization. It happens for a reason. Polarization happens because you have two opposing groups of people or more, which seem to find no connective thread between their beliefs. We need to ask what the role beliefs actually play. And in order to understand that, we need to ask, what does the brain actually do? Okay, the brain does one thing only. It helps us survive. To do that, it has only one prime function. It tries to, as accurately as possible, predict the next moment. If it does that well enough, then we can see what's happening, we can prepare ourselves, and we act accordingly, and we survive. In order to predict the next possible moment, it uses a lot of clues. It uses a belief system. It uses memories. It uses knowledge. It extrapolates from what we know, and it forms a perception, and it filters everything through that. And then it makes its estimate, and we act accordingly. So beliefs really are key to how we see the future, how we see the world. If our beliefs are really wrong, and this is where basically we get to actually discuss about polarized camps and how they can find the common ground. If we have two people of entirely different ideologies, and they each make a projection on how the world should be, if the projection is right for each of them, then they're both right, and the world is a lot more complex than we think. If the projection is marginally wrong for each of them, well, they're both right, okay, and there's a margin of error which is acceptable. But if one of them is tragically wrong, then for that person, the brain hasn't worked the way it's supposed to work. And at that point, a correction takes place. Classic example is the heavier than air flight. The Wright brothers proved it was possible. But before the Wright brothers proved it was possible, even though the laws of buoyancy were well known, eminent physicists, mathematicians, scientists, and personalities from across the globe said time and again, heavier than air flight is not possible. Lord Kelvin, right, in England, the guy who gave us a Kelvin scale in physics, said that everybody knows, that's what he said in 1885, I think it was, that heavier than air flight is impossible. That's it. He said that.
Right.
Okay. Because, that's what he thought. This is his belief system, and he actually projected upon it. The moment that it was proved, however, that the flight is possible, they all changed their tune. Because it changed their belief system. Because the belief system gave them a prediction which was eminently wrong. The world doesn't work the way you think it does. So you change. And that's how we should approach polarization, is, do your beliefs project a world that actually works the way you think it does? And if it does, and we accept, and we can see that it does, and if mine also works, then obviously there's a complexity there which can both work with, because neither of us is wrong. If my prediction doesn't work and yours works, then I have to rethink my own belief system. Say, wait a minute, how does Martin get this image of the world and it works for him? And how does the thing which I thought was going to happen doesn't? And then I'm going to have to come to you and say, explain it to me again. Okay, so this is how we should approach it. The way we approach it, however, these days isn't like that. The way we approach it is, I come to you and say, hey, Martin, you're wrong. And you say, no, David, you are wrong. Right. So what happens? You feel attacked and threatened, and you respond, and I feel attacked and threatened, and I respond. So we fight to prove who's right without examining the orthology of what we actually believe in.
It's almost like the human condition seems to be, the more afraid of its survival is, the more it entrenches that the Wright brothers, that was an exception. That can't actually happen. There was something wrong with it. It seems to be the more we're scared. It's almost like, have you ever seen a cat that gets scared? It doesn't even know its owner. It'll attack anything.
That's
and
right.
The more afraid we get, the harder it is for us to have that bigger perception, or sometimes just the lack of socialization to develop compassion can cause this, where we don't know that as a distinction in life.
Yeah. Dune by Frank Herbert. That was written in 1964 as a novel. That's when it came out. I mean, he wrote it a lot earlier, okay, but it was published in 1964, which is the year I was born. And he has there an incantation against fear, a litany against fear, they call it. And it begins with, fear is the mind killer. Okay, what do we know today? We know that if we're afraid, there's a whole lot of neurochemical changes that take place in our body, which activate the fight or flight response. Now, if we are afraid of a tiger, this is the perfect response to have. Okay, you don't want to sit there and think, is this a tiger or is it a lion? Is there a difference? Is it, is it going to eat me, or is it going to play? What you don't want to think these things. Right. You see fear, you see a lion, a tiger coming towards you, you need to run away because you can't fight it. If you can't run away, you have to fight it because they have no other chance. Okay, you're prepared for those things. In order to be prepared for those two things, your cortisol levels go up, your blood vessels are restricted, your blood temperature goes up, your heart rate goes up, your breathing becomes shallow. And because all these things are energy intensive things which prepare you for fight or flight, the higher centers of your brain, which would actually help you analyze what you're facing, shut down. They're not available to you anymore. So if we get into a situation where, we'll confront each other, for instance, with accusations, and we have a potential fight on our hands, neither of us is thinking properly because we can't. We've got a situation now where you might attack me or I might attack you. And I'm thinking, okay, Martin has, a weapon. I may be, may lose this fight. Maybe I should think about running. I'm not thinking about talking to you. All I'm thinking is this attack thing. We need to be able to de-escalate things. And the only way in a modern world to de-escalate things is in phrasing things differently. So a perceived attack isn't perceived as an attack anymore. So instead of saying to you, hey, Martin, what you think is wrong, and saying to me, hey, David, no, you are wrong. If we frame this differently, I say, hey, show me how your idea works. And you actually show it to me. If you show it to me and it works, I've learned something. I'm going away enriched, and neither of us has fought. If your idea doesn't work, I'll say, wait a minute. Let's test mine now. Same thing, right? And if mine works better than yours, then again, we both know something from this, and we both learned something. We didn't have to fight. It takes a lot of maturity these days to reframe things in a way that's non-threatening. And unfortunately, we get carried away by what we see around us. We see some of our eminent politicians, for instance, hurling stupid accusations and stupid attacks against each other and think, well, if they're doing it and, we put them on a pedestal and they're ruling us, then maybe we should be doing it, right? But no, we should not be doing it. We should be better than them because they're not as good as they should be, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a great piece. And the next piece I wanted to move to is this idea of distinguishing between the moment by moment emotions and then kind of a gut sense. And it's important to do it. And you have some good language on that, but it's just like when I was studying the martial art Aikido, that actually the goal was that you were training yourself so there was a gut sense that would occur. And while I was training, I was managing, when I first took it, I was managing a Radio Shack. And it was almost like the Star Wars Force idea. It goes, trust your gut sense versus your emotions. And I swear I could identify a shoplifter standing behind me and then would know to turn and look versus a regular shopper. And this is, I think, a thing that gets kind of collapsed. It's like moment by moment emotions versus gut sense.
Yes. Okay. And I'm glad you brought this up. Now, essentially, we know that there's a thing called interoception, which is the way that we basically become aware of how we function, how we think. And if we think about this, basically it's learning to listen to our bodies, right? And what they're telling us. We live in an environment that constantly feeds information to us, and we process that information, which is what interoception does. As we process it, we reach certain conclusions. A lot of those conclusions are subconscious, and our body reacts to them. By becoming aware of them, we become aware of the environment, we become more situationally aware. The classic example of what you gave, right? You were superbly situationally aware. You knew how your environment worked because it was your environment, truly, not just you being there. You were acutely aware of it, and you knew that somebody behaving in a particular way signified a particular thing. Okay, in this case, a shoplifter. And you knew that person is not here to give me money and in exchange for goods, right?
Right.
All right, so essentially, this is something which requires us as people, to step away from the focus on just our own personal needs. We need to think, this is how our environment operates, this is how we operate in the environment, this is how our body tells us specific things. And these are some of the emotions which arise from that. Some of those emotions may be fear, for example, it may be uncertainty, it may be a sense of foreboding. And we need to be able to differentiate between the things which we feel and the signals we get to specific stimuli. And that's what you're describing, which is amazing to actually do when we actually do it, because it changes the way we interact with the environment and the world. And then we change as people. And so many of us don't do it because, we don't feel the need. We don't feel that we are capable of doing it. We're not even aware that we can do it sometimes.
And for me, the way I started developing it was, what is the feeling, and then what actually happened, and starting to separate out the mechanics, like decide in a digital way what actually happened versus the feelings.
Yes. And you did the classic thing. What did you do? You basically listened to your body, and then you listened to your mind, and you said, okay, what do I feel in particular situations? And what have I experienced, which is where interoception comes in, that actually made me feel that way. And the moment you do that, this is what happens. You're able to separate the experience from the feelings. You're able to practice emotional regulation, so you control what you feel, and you're better able to react to the experiences that you're actually receiving from the environment around you.
Well, this was a blast of a conversation. I hope people enjoyed it as much. And I want to hear what others think. It might spur another one. But this is something we've been having pieces of over a number of years. And I'm so grateful that we got to a store. I want to hear from people. Put your comments in below. Let us know what you like. And I do want to also say, make sure to subscribe and click the bell, and let us hear what you want to know next. David, I'm going to end with telling people about your new book.
Thank you very much for that. Certainly. We get Intentional: How to Live, Love, Work, and Play Meaningfully. It's all about compartmentalizing all the different elements that make us up, understanding what they are, and then synthesizing them all together so we can be more aware of how we actually operate.
Yeah. It's just terrific. I'll make sure there'll be a link below and you can get it from there. And I really look forward to our next conversation. This was delightful.
Me too. Thank you so much.